Hello, Internet. Welcome back to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. Josh Norris and John Daigle here. Daigle, show number 2 in this new studio. They didn't kick us out yet.
It is, and I think we started off wrong. Correction, I started off wrong. Because I believe I was looking at that camera, not this one.
Oh, so great start.
You would think we're veterans at this, but I don't think so just yet.
So today's episode, as the title suggests, we will have Nick Mensio with his notable start-sits, and then Patrick Doherty with his rankings. This is an episode... Well, kind of we're squishing together for week 1, but then week 2 we'll separate it as well. Both columns are up on Rotoworld, so be sure to go.
Loads of columns up on Rotoworld, actually. The people were concerned about content. Well, I got news. Nope. We have content.
But every episode we are going to start with news, so let's start with news. And the biggest news, John Daigle, is that Ezekiel Elliott has signed a new contract. It's a 6-year extension, which is important. Yes. $90 million includes a whopping $50 million guaranteed. It was important, it seemed like, for Ezekiel Elliott to be the highest paid running back in the NFL. He has that. $15 million annually, surpasses Todd Gurley's, I believe was like just over 14 as well.
Yes, the guaranteed, as you said, $50 million, which Todd Gurley's was around 43.25.
Yeah.
So now he's clearly the highest paid running back all time in the league. However, the thing here is that it's going to reset. So it's a bad move logically by the Cowboys, just in general.
Why? I think he's the best player on that offense. Why is it a bad move?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. It's bad because they paid a running back. It's just like, let's dumb it down to the
just
very
in general,
simplest
that's
form.
a general statement you want to make?
I think so, honestly. Okay. When you give that much to a running back. However, what happens here, it's not so much bad financially for the Cowboys. That's what people are yelling about right now. Because all they do with these contracts and deadline deals, especially if you know this franchise, they just pay up front and then push people out the door slowly. So while Zeke, then Dak, then Amari get their deals, that's slowly pushing out Travis Frederick and Zach Martin and right guard, slipping my mind right now.
The right guard position is a lot of other people, like Connor Williams is there, Connor McGovern.
So it's a bet actually on those guys, which is not a good bet if you've watched them play so far.
Because you can't pay everyone, right? But Dallas has done a lot of business just in the last few weeks.
Yes.
Because everyone this offseason talked about Amari Cooper getting a new deal, Dak Prescott getting a new deal, and obviously Ezekiel Elliott. Meanwhile, they have paid Jalen Smith, they have paid La'el Collins, and now Ezekiel Elliott. I wonder how these dynamics of Dak and Amari getting paid or not getting paid probably this season, how that will handle itself because, a lot of money is being dished out. And I think the salary cap is kind of a mirage when we think about it, unless you just handle it so poorly. We've seen teams that are right up against it create it with just a lot of different ways. The Eagles are an example. And I think the Cowboys are getting smarter with how they spend their money as well.
Absolutely. They haven't done that whole rollover contract thing they used to do and just stack debt on the back end since the Romo era, which I know that the Romo era wasn't too long ago, but still they have improved mightily since that time. So I think it's going to work itself out. And as you said, cap a mirage, especially when you're talking about who is usually listed atop the Forbes most richest franchises list. It's not, that part is not an issue at all.
It will be interesting, and we'll get to Jared Goff's contract in a little bit, what Dak Prescott gets in his. I think it might actually benefit him to not sign it now and wait just a little bit to play under Kellen Moore, because Kellen Moore is going to be the best play caller he's ever had in his NFL career.
Who is up next? We knew Goff was up next.
It's Dak.
Who is up next? Is that Dak really the next one?
Because Wentz, Goff, then Dak, and they were all in the same draft.
I can't believe, so Dak, the moment I saw Goff's extension, I didn't even think about 134, 110 million guaranteed. I thought about Dak. Because it literally reset the market. He couldn't have expected that either. He really couldn't have expected that.
Again, it was important for Zeke to be the highest paid running back because he said, I'm the best. This ties him through the Dallas Cowboys, at least contract-wise, which it may not actually happen that way, but through the 2026 season.
Because confusingly, since he has 2 years left on his deal and held out, then he can only receive, I believe, a 30% raise in year one, which is why then the years roll over, and then it'll be a year-to-year basis, basically, starting in 2021.
All right, that's nerd talk. Okay, but we did, and we talked about it yesterday on the podcast with Ian Harditz in terms of all 16 game previews that Jane Slater reported that the Cowboys expect Zeke to have around 20 to 25 reps. Hopefully that means touches, but it probably means snaps on the field. But we expect, one, a larger workload than that
Yes,
in week 1.
skeptical of that report.
But even more importantly, a 70 to 80%, maybe even more than that workload moving forward after week 1.
The way I see it is,
Don't let your Tony Pollard love stand in the way here.
I do love Tony Pollard. So here's the thing, but there is actual viable reason to get Tony Pollard involved in this offense because
There is.
Zeke last year, I think it was 95 targets he totaled, but he had never received more than 40 targets before last year. So last year you can actually consider an anomaly, not a consistent moving forward, which then means Tony Pollard, 40, 50 targets, go to him. So that's why I am high on Tony Pollard because I think he takes away from Zeke.
In just his 3 seasons in the NFL, and this is just rushing, 322 carries for Zeke in 15 games. As a rookie in 2016, 242 in 10 games in 2017, and last year, 304 carries in 15 games. Most notably, he added so much in the passing game. I mean, previous reception totals were 22 and 36. Last year, in 2018, 77 receptions, and we think he's going to keep that as well. I actually think the raw touchdown totals will rise because he only scored 6 rushing touchdowns last season.
Like I said, I'm actually concerned he doesn't keep the catches.
Interesting.
I think they go at least 65% to Tony Pollard. And I know that's a hot statement right now because everyone just thinks he's not going to be involved at all. But they drafted him for a reason. So
Let's hit a few more topics. Another running back, Melvin Gordon, has also been holding out. We know that the Chargers told him to go seek a trade. And I think at the beginning that was a negotiation tactic, being like, hey, we're not going to pay you what you want to be paid, so go find someone that can. You're not going to find anyone who can. So, and now the Chargers have basically said, we're not even going to negotiate with you anymore. You either play for us under the contract that you have, or you don't play this season.
although I thoroughly enjoy Howie Roseman being that fantasy owner that just picks at you by sending a bad trade, just shipping them Jordan Howard and a mid-round pick for Melvin Gordon. Come on.
It wasn't even just a mid-round pick. It was a swap of picks.
It's quite enjoyable.
I love it whenever Howie Roseman obviously just acquired Jordan Howard this offseason. But it is when he sees he can improve just a little bit. I mean, they were in the Clowney trade possibly as well. When he sees just a little bit of an improvement possibly in his roster, he'll attack it and send you that awful offer.
Absolutely. Which is what more GMs should do.
So a lot of people drafted Melvin Gordon. I did not at all.
I did.
When do you think he's going to enter the league? Is it week 10 when he has to pick up an accrued season?
That is the deadline date we're looking at and eyeing closely because, as you said, this year rolls over into his free agency years if he doesn't report by week 10. The thing is, the Chargers don't hit bye until week 12. So if I had to guess, I would say 8 weeks, which means if you drafted Gordon as I had been yelling, actually.
To do?
Yeah, and around preseason
Daigle.
week 2. Around preseason week 2, I genuinely thought he was coming back.
What's interesting is a lot of people, and you get your phone hit up a lot during draft season, right? Every single morning you wake up to a new phone number that you don't even know who it is. For me, it was a lot of people asking if I should draft Melvin Gordon in round 4. No. To me, the earliest was round 6, round 7, but someone else was going to take him ahead in round 4. He's truly going to sit out until week 10.
Well,
He's going to.
Yes, but the whole reason I had Melvin Gordon ranked that high as well because I also had Austin Eckler a tier up above the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
Okay, you can pad yourself by grabbing Eckler at the same time. And now we're going to see Eckler. They say it's going to be a split down the middle with Justin Jackson, but I doubt it.
Eckler looked good in preseason.
He always
Awesome
looks good.
in preseason.
I think it's more of a 65-35 situation we're looking at.
And be sure to look at RotoPat's rankings and really everyone's rankings on the site to see where he has Austin Eckler listed.
And we'll ask him when he comes on about it.
Maybe we will. Okay, let's go to Laremy Tunsil. Laremy Tunsil has now been traded to the Houston Texans. We talked about this again with the podcast yesterday with Ian. They acquired him, the Texans did, and Kenny Stills, and a 4th-round pick from the Dolphins in exchange for 2 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick, along with a special teamer and possibly the starting left tackle of the Miami Dolphins this year in Julian Davenport. My question to you, Daigle, is this. It's important that the Texans added this piece. It has been an issue since they traded away Dwayne Brown to the Seahawks, who they also dealt Jadeveon Clowney to. But there's no new deal in place with Laremy Tunsil right now. And that's a major, major question. He has all the leverage in the world. We talked, Melvin Gordon has no leverage in his holdout. Laremy Tunsil has all the leverage because you gave up future assets, yet you haven't paid him his big next contract. He can ask for top left tackle money in the NFL.
Which is why, honestly, he should hold out. He's not going to, but if you want, I mean, when you have that much leverage, if you want to really do business and talk business, he should just hold out right now. However, he's not going to, obviously, and he should demand as much money as possible. Hopefully, he gets that much. Otherwise, wouldn't he just walk? Honestly,
you smile a lot, Daigle. You have a little bit of a devil in you. You have a contrarian.
It's just business is all it is.
I mean, but you do fight for that dollar.
I fight for the players. I always fight for the players.
Okay.
I will say that.
What do you think this does, finally having the best left tackle on the team since Dwayne Brown? What do you think this does to Deshaun Watson's outlook? Because we've talked about this offseason. There's a chance he ends as the quarterback one.
Yes.
This makes it even more likely, along with the addition of Kenny Stills as well.
Props to friend of the show, Evan Silva, who had him ranked as the QB1 all offseason, whereas I've had him as QB2 and Mahomes QB1. But the addition of Tunsil, plus the injury to Lamar Miller, which then inserts a pass-catching back. There's no doubt in my mind Duke Johnson can be an every-down guy, especially as a runner, but his strength is still pass-catching. So all of that combined only propels the Texans' passing offense. And it's going to be a show because week 1 they open in the Superdome. Sure. And although their defense is a disaster, honestly, and the Saints will probably walk all over them, the offense in general is going to be so much fun to watch and be so much better this year.
Major questions to me about that Texans defense. But I'm crossing my fingers that Will Fuller stays healthy.
Yes.
Because that, along with DeAndre Hopkins, along with Kenny Stills, along with Kiki Cutie, along with Duke Johnson, with Deshaun Watson, who brings pressure on himself but is a playmaker mentality to his game. It's exciting.
The difference now is if QT or Fuller go down, though, we have Kenny Stills, who is an efficient runner both on the outside and in the slot. So they have pieces to move around this year.
We are going to talk about Duke Johnson a little bit with RotoPat, but let's close out this news segment with that Jared Goff extension. 4 years, $134 million contract extension that includes an NFL record $110 million guarantee. We talked about it earlier this week. I actually think people have forgotten how good the Rams are. And I understand it from this perspective. We just look at it from that. Because they played so poorly in the Super Bowl. I mean, it's a high-scoring team with a very efficient offense, yet their quarterback and even some of their other players weren't able to take that next step and carry the team when it was necessary, when the Patriots had everything shut down appropriately.
I am concerned this week, especially in week 1 against the Panthers, not only because Jared Goff's horrendous road splits, but because the interior of that line, left guard, center, right guard, 18 combined starts over the past half decade. It's going to be concerning, especially giving Gerald McCoy and Brian Burns and everyone else Carolina added in their front 7. So this week is going to be confusing if the Rams sputter.
And telling. It could be very telling.
Yes, but also on the road in Carolina is a tough matchup, especially if Cam Newton's at return to full health right now. So I'm not sure we can take away much. But the thing about Jared Goff's extension is it's only the first of a stepping stone. It's going to get more and more higher as we continue.
Yeah.
Like we said, Dak is next.
Meanwhile, Cam Newton is the 10th or 15th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. One of the biggest values right now among the position. What also stands out to me has been Sean McVay's comments all offseason. Because he knows, immediately after the Super Bowl, it seemed like he had a lot of regret. Because this is someone that played about 95% of the time in 11 personnel. They did what they did and tried to make you stop it. The Patriots stopped it. And I think he has spent the last few months trying to take and evolve his offense. We don't know what that's going to be. Because Cooper Kupp is very good in the slot. Maybe it's getting Gerald Everett more involved. Maybe it's having 2 backs like Darrell Henderson on the field at the same time. We will learn a lot about the next step of Sean McVay and his play calling, I think, in week 1 against Carolina.
And they ran 11 personnel at the highest rate. I think it was 97%. Of course, there was deception and different plays involved with that 11 personnel, but it was one straight personnel. And so, especially since they just extended Tyler Higbee to a 4-year contract extension this morning, yes, I would think that we would see more 2 tight end sets. But as you said, what does that entail? Is it Darrell Henderson on this field at the same time with Todd Gurley? So that should be interesting to watch for sure.
Nick Mensio now joins us for his start and sits column, The Notable Ones, and it's up on Thursday nights. Nick, let's start off with Matt Breida. He's one of your favorite plays this week.
Yeah, I love Breida. Obviously I'm not trying to pick out the most obvious guys here in this column. So Breida, borderline RB2, RB3 in this spot, but I think he has upside here to make a top 25 finish against the Bucs here in this game. Everyone's going to be stacking 49.5 point total. Not really sure who's going to get the quote-unquote start here for the Niners between Tevin Coleman and Breida, but the Niners' backs averaged over 26 touches per game last year, so if Breida can get 12 to 14 in this spot against a Bucs defense that lost Jason Pierre-Paul to a neck injury, Vita Vea, a nose tackle to a knee injury, cut Gerald McCoy in the offseason. The Niners return all 5 offensive line starters, one of the better run blocking units in the league last year. And then when these two teams met last week 12, Matt Breida got 17 touches, played 48% of the snaps, and totaled 140 yards. No touchdowns or anything like that, but if he can find the end zone in this spot, I think he can obviously crush his ADP and crush his ranking spot this week in a game everyone's going to be talking about fantasy-wise.
And that's what I've talked with you about earlier this week, Nick, is the fact that this game, that Vegas just got the total wrong. Like, it opened at 49.5, and it's since increased 1.5, but it's still just wrong. Like, it should be 55. It's going to close over the highest total of the week and finish as the actual total on the slate, the highest. So, like, any piece you can have, especially when you can get basically a 1B back in a starting offense like this, is a terrific start.
Nick. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he doesn't need to play. He doesn't need to play 60 to 70% of snaps to produce fancy numbers in this spot.
He may not out-touch Tevin Coleman, but I would actually bet on him out-carrying Tevin Coleman, whether he's actually on the field for the first play or not.
This is kind of the last week I will cite preseason stats, but it was notable to me that Tevin Coleman played around 62% of the first-team snaps in the preseason, with Matt Breida at 38%. But, Nick, as you alluded to, there's going to be multiple games where both backs are viable starting candidates because we know how good the 49ers backfield was as a whole last year. Nick, let's now move on to Dede Westbrook, obviously the wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars are 3.5-point dogs at home. I know you've been touting up Dede Westbrook despite my reservations all offseason. What do you think about Dede this week?
Yeah, 51.5-point total here for Chiefs Jags, second highest of the week one. The Chiefs were 31st in opponent plays per game last year. They allowed a ton of catches to wideouts. The Jaguars, when these teams met last week 5, ran 83 offensive plays. That was their most of the season last season. So I expect a ton of volume here for the Jaguars. I don't know if they're going to put up a bunch of points, but volume equals fantasy points. So if Foles can fire off 30-plus attempts, and then we saw in the third preseason game where he threw 10 passes and 7 of those went to Dede Westbrook and produced a four catches for 29 yards and a touchdown in a little over a quarter work that night. I think he's just going to get peppered with targets here, going against Kendall Fuller, the Chiefs slot corner. Among qualified slot corners at Pro Football Focus last year, Fuller allowed the most catches for the most yards and a 110.5 passer rating in his coverage. So I love Westbrook as a guy to outproduce his ADP in opening week. Wide receiver 3, lock him in fantasy lineups this week. That's
how we targeted slot receivers in those playoff DFS slates as well, because Kendall Fuller in general, the past 2 months to close out the year for the Chiefs, allowed 29 of 34 targets his way to be caught. And the last time I'll mention preseason stats, Nick Foles obviously targeted Dede Westbrook on 7 of his 10 pass attempts this preseason. So
Westbrook actually led the league in routes run from the slot in 2019 with 493. Nick, if I dug into this a little bit more, I might have liked Dede. Maybe you should have talked and tried to do this.
I yelled at you at one podcast. Yes. I told you, you're missing out on Dede.
Nick, those are a few of your favorite plays this week and a few sits that are notable. Starting off with Christian Kirk, wide receiver with the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, we know that the Cardinals offense might look quite different. They are home dogs to the Detroit Lions by about 2.5 points right now.
Yeah, we talked about preseason, but going back again to preseason here, the Cardinals were just super vanilla, didn't show their hand much with new coach Cliff Kingsbury's offense in the preseason. We expect them to run a bunch 4 wide, but they were rotating. They kept 7 receivers on their 53-man roster. They were rotating all these receivers with the first-team group during the preseason. That led to Christian Kirk playing around 50% of the snaps with the first-team offense. I just don't know what to expect with this offense. I don't know who's going to play. I mean, I expect Kirk to be in there, obviously, more than 50% of the time. But going against a Lions team that was number 1 in opponent plays per game last year, they played at the 4th slowest offensive pace. So I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be able to sustain drives against this defense. I mean, the Lions defense, they added Trey Flowers up front, Mike Daniels up front as well to go with Damon Harrison, Deshaun Hand. This defensive line could dominate this Cardinals offensive line, which is one of the 2 or 3 worst on paper. So if I have better wide receiver threes on my roster that I can choose from, I'm just not going to run Kirk out there in the first week when I just don't know what to expect.
Another addition they had besides that front seven, significant players on their front seven would be Justin Coleman, who was a shutdown slot corner for the Seahawks, and now he would likely be on Christian Kirk. Because although Christian Kirk's preseason usage was very strange with Kyler Murray on the field, the fact is he still ran 83% of his routes from the slot, so he would likely be matched up against Coleman. So although I do actually like the Cardinals' offense, yes, as you said it best, if you have another fringe WR3, week 1 is probably the spot to start him over Kirk.
Nick, how much of the Cardinals' performance this week will leave you optimistic, pessimistic for the rest of the season? Because again, they talk so much of how vanilla that offense was that I think a lot of us are in wait-and-see mode this week and maybe overreacting too much either direction of what happens in week 1 against the Lions.
Yeah, I'm really not too worried about this offense putting out fantasy stats, but the offensive line is a major concern. Just being able to sustain drives is the major key here. I mean, we can see teams run super fast, but if they're off the field in 14 seconds of game clock, 3 and out, I mean, that doesn't help anyone.
Let's close this segment with David Njoku. The Browns, so much optimism. 5.5-point home favorites against the Tennessee Titans this week. Nick, I fell victim to David Njoku last season. He was even drafted as a tight end 9, so in a shallow position, possibly. A lot of people are banking on starting him here in week 1. You have some reservations, though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're talking about tight ends, one of the super shallowest position in fantasy, so I mean, I understand if you have to play him. I mean, you have to play him. But 4.6 targets per game after Freddie Kitchens took over play calling duties last year. That was after averaging 6.2 targets under Hugh Jackson. The Titans were one of the best teams at covering tight ends with all-pro safety Kevin Byard. The Titans play super slow. They limit amount of plays for the opposing offense, and now Odell Beckham's in the picture to just take the biggest piece of the pie targets-wise. So this just feels like a touchdown or bust spot for Njoku. I mean, I obviously understand running him out there for that touchdown potential, but I'm not expecting a ton of volume here in this spot at all.
His target rate actually went down once Freddie Kitchens took over as well, as you said. So it's not really. I mean, you shouldn't have drafted David Njoku anyway. So if you did,
I agree.
I don't know what to say.
And actually, the Titans have been really, really good against tight ends over the last 3 seasons. Nick, thanks so much, man. Everyone out there, again, you can check out Nick's column Thursday nights. Start sits really goes off the wall in terms of some very interesting names that you might not be thinking about. Bold is the right word, not off the wall. Bold is the right word. Nick, thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Now it's time for Patrick Daugherty to join the show, RotoPat, with his rankings segment. They are up right now for all of you to help with your start-sit conundrums, your lineup conundrums. Pat, let's start off with Matt Ryan. You have him as the quarterback 19 on the road against the Minnesota Vikings. The reason I wanted to bring this one up, Pat, is he was drafted as the quarterback 6. So having him as the quarterback 19, you're basically destroying the hope that anyone out there has who drafted him in their leagues.
Just for week 1, I'm confident Matt Ryan will probably finish the season. Oh, I was about to say, I said probably after I said I was confident. Matt Ryan should finish the season as a top 8 quarterback. But, there's a lot of complex. We have so many great advanced stats now. Next generation stats, such great match information. But the argument for Matt Ryan is pretty simple. He's on the road against one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. The Vikings allowed a league low 15 passing touchdowns last year. Football Outsiders graded them as a top 4 pass defense. See very little reason to expect a regression from the Vikings pass defense this year. And Matt Ryan is just a great player in a bad spot. Unfortunately, it happens to be in week 1, when you're kind of like unveiling all your shiny new toys for your fantasy team, but it's just not a good matchup.
Yeah, and although it's indoors, the true question mark is how many plays does this new run-only Vikings offense attempt to suck away from opposing offenses? So now, also with the Falcons wanting to establish the run, quote-unquote, and get Devontae Freeman involved early, then yes, it's probably looking at just a down week for Matt Ryan.
Pat, I'm assuming this means...
Excellent point from John, too. The game could hit the under easily.
Pat, I'm assuming this means you're also down on Julio Jones this week as well.
Well, not so. Someone's got to get it. I think it will be Julio.
Okay.
He has a tough history with Xavier Rhodes, but I faded Julio to the mid-range of the wide receiver 1 rankings. I wanted to have him in the top 3 or 4. That just wasn't realistic. But Julio's someone, even with, I think it's only 2 career, kind of letdowns against Xavier Rhodes, but you do have to fade him a bit. But Julio's just one of those guys. His past sample sizes matter until they don't, and you have to consider Julio a fantasy bomb, liable to go off any week. I still have him in the top 8.
Yeah, Matt Ryan against the Mike Zimmer-led Minnesota Vikings, quarterback 14, quarterback 29, and quarterback 30 with 4 total touchdown passes and 4 interceptions in those starts.
And Julio Jones against Xavier Rhodes the last 2 starts.
Not so good.
6 catches.
There we go.
Not good.
Not good is official. Okay, Pat, let's go to the next name. That is Texans running back, still weird to say, Duke Johnson. You have him as running back 21 at the New Orleans Saints as 7-point dogs. I mean, a super high total of 53.5. Pat, the reason I want to ask this question is I really just want to hear your thought process of ranking him as a secure running back 2, because he closed out, Duke Johnson did, around running back 32, obviously after Deontay Foreman was cut and he was, named the starting running back. We just don't know what Duke Johnson's role or identity is on the Houston Texans.
Yeah, we don't know, and he's at the part of the board where you just don't know with a lot of the people. He's at the questions part of the running back board. Is Derrick Henry healthy after the weird summer? And, he's on the road. Will game script favor Derrick Henry? We don't know what to expect from David Montgomery or Josh Jacobs. We've never seen them play a down of regular season NFL football. We don't know what to expect from Marlon Mack. Will he not have the positive game flow that he built his fantasy season on last year? And Damian Williams is the next thing. We don't know. So it's the part of the board where we don't know. I love Duke Johnson, and this is just about firing up a big play threat, a pass-catching threat in a game that's the premier fantasy game of the week. And even if they're 7-point underdogs, it's kind of game script we hope will favor a pass-catching back like Duke Johnson. So Carlos Hyde could vulture goal line carries, but I just think Duke is projected for a safe workload in the premier fantasy game of the week, and I like his questions, quote-unquote, more than the guys behind him. That's where I have him where I do.
And he just has so many outs, as you said. Like, he can get involved and will be involved in the passing game, especially in an up-tempo matchup where too many people just think about the Saints offense at home, whereas the opposing offense always benefits as well historically. So Duke Johnson is just a smash play. And, Mark Ingram's really the only newcomer questionable running back in a new offense that I would rank over him. Otherwise, it's just, you throw him ahead of those rookies and other players.
Yeah, Mark Ingram is the only newcomer running back I have ranked ahead of Duke Johnson.
I actually didn't see that, so yeah.
In total agreement.
So basically, the optimism that both of you guys have means that Carlos Hyde's going to have 21 touches this week is what we're getting out of this. That's a joke.
I'm thinking 18 to 20. I'm thinking 18 to 20, Josh.
All right,
the bright lights, Monday Night Football.
Let's go next to Kenny Galladay, the lead wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. Pat, you have him as wide receiver 18 this week. On the road, but favorites against the Arizona Cardinals. Patty, close out in drafts around wide receiver 21. The reason I wanted to bring this name up is because you and I were texting earlier this week because we're actually real-life friends. And you know that I have been down on Kenny Galladay this entire draft process. So it stood out to me, Pat, that you have him ranked higher than where his ADP was.
Josh, you got to let it go.
I can't.
You've got to let it go.
Maybe after this week.
I don't know what Kenny Galladay has done to the Norris family.
Wow.
I pray it wasn't that bad, but you have to let it go. We've debated Kenny Galladay and good nature all summer. It's a very interesting debate. I understand your negative points, but just zeroing in on this week. First off, Kenny Galladay, by the way, was the wide receiver 21 by raw points last year and the wide receiver 24 by average points. So the perception of his 2018 can sometimes be a little skewed, in my opinion. But the running Lions, if there's ever a week they were going to have to throw, if the Cardinals are who we think they are, this will be one of the weeks where the Lions have to throw. Who are the Cardinals? Do you even know who the Cardinals are starting at cornerback? Are they starting Tremaine Brock in a second rounder? Byron Murray? I mean, so the Cardinals secondary, far from imposing, a game that has sneaky shootout potential. And this has almost no bearing on it, but people worry about Danny Amendola and what should be a run-first offense, another pass catcher to kind of cut up the target share. But Kenny Golladay actually had his best fantasy week last year where Golden Tate was still on the Lions, and they were still 3 deep at receiver. So it's not like that's an insurmountable object in his way either. So to me, it's just more about still liking Kenny Galladay's talent, and this game to me having a lot of sneaky shootout appeal this week.
My only concern about ranking Golladay so high this week is not the offense, and that's the only time I'm going to say that about the Lions offense, is the fact that he had 10 targets at the end of the year per game without Marvin Jones, and he averaged 6 targets with Marvin Jones on the field. And Marvin Jones actually outproduced him when they were on the field together. Marvin Jones has a better rapport with Matthew Stafford when they're on the field together. That is my only concern about Golladay ranking as a fringe top 20 receiver.
See, this week, to me, this could end up being Galladay's high water mark for the foreseeable future.
Nice.
So I agree actually with most of your point. This week, though, I just think it's a good spot.
And for all I know, we could actually be agreeing, because it could just mean Marvin Jones is a sleeper, whereas Kenny Golladay is still a fringe top 20 receiver.
Well, I know I'm seeing the correct buzz that Marvin Jones is the better DFS play this week, because he will certainly be low owned and much lower owned than Kenny Golladay. But for season long, Kenny Golladay is the play.
And Marvin Jones, I would qualify as a flex, if not close to a wide receiver 3.
Let's close out this segment, again, looking at Pat's rankings, which are up on Rotoworld right now, with Jarvis Landry, the Browns wide receiver. You have him, Pat, as wide receiver 36 at home. Heavy favorites, 5.5 against the Tennessee Titans. Pat, again, I'm referring to ADP because that's still relevant here. He closed as wide receiver 30. So you're basically telling people who drafted him earlier than I would have, but to consider sitting him possibly at wide receiver 36, because that's a fringe wide receiver 3 territory.
Well, since we first had our talk this week, I've exploded him up the ranks to wide receiver 34.
Oh, okay.
Skyrocketed.
That's just, yeah. Your argument's just really in tatters there. Jarvis Landry, the name of his fantasy game is volume. And after the Browns offense really took off last year following their bye, I think the final 6 games of the season, he only averaged 4 catches per game. He did average 62 yards per game, but he had 2 100-yard blowups in his other 4 games. Was really playing like a complimentary player. And to me, if that happens with Jarvis Landry, where he's just fighting for targets with Rashad Perriman and Antonio Callaway, what's going to happen to him with Odell Beckham and still an ascendant David Njoku and Rashad Higgins, who Baker Mayfield seems to have an excellent rapport with. And this week he probably has the toughest assignment too of any of the Browns pass catchers, and Logan Ryan, the Titans slot corner. And Jarvis, it's kind of a brave new world for Jarvis Landry. He's in an offense that doesn't funnel him the ball, with a quarterback who doesn't really lock on to any specific target. That was one of the most remarkable things about Baker Mayfield's rookie season, the way he spread the ball around. That's rare for any quarterback, but especially for a rookie quarterback. And Jarvis Landry's a great player. I wouldn't be stunned if he reestablished himself as an every week kind of top 30, top 32 guy. But yeah, to me, there's early season skepticism is warranted, and especially when he has a tough matchup like Logan Ryan.
Yeah, just looking at Jarvis Landry's season outlook, I look back and just ask the question, when was the last time Jarvis Landry did not lead his team in targets? And it was all the way back in his rookie season, actually with Mike Wallace.
I thought you were going to say like second grade.
Right, but even since then, I mean, it's been a gap of like 50, 40 targets per year. So to me, just what is the value, what is the identity that Jarvis Landry is going to have when he just, like Pat mentioned, isn't funneled targets each and every week? Because it would be shocking, stunning if Odell Beckham does not lead this team in targets.
Last year,
Baker Mayfield, challenge accepted.
There we go.
Last year, I consider an anomaly for Landry just because he had never been used as a primary slot receiver, actually tallying air yards down the field as a deep target. And he performed well with that, but now he moves back into the slot, which actually allows Rashad Higgins to potentially start over him in 2 wide receiver sets, especially given his rapport with Baker Mayfield, as you talked about. So yes, like the ancillary pieces are why I am concerned about Jarvis Landry, more so than the matchup or anything else.
Pat, thanks so much, buddy.
He's a quarterback that doesn't need a security blanket, too. Baker Mayfield's good enough where he's not like some bad Dolphins quarterback or Tyrod Taylor where he needs a security blanket to lock on to.
Which is why I'm slightly concerned about Beckham in season long as well, but that's an argument for another day.
To say a long story short, we are concerned about Jarvis Landry.
Pat, thanks so much, buddy. And by the way, I mentioned Landry's wide receiver 36. Pat has him at wide receiver 34. That just points to Pat constantly updating these rankings. They would be updated all the way up until kickoff on Sunday morning. And by the way, Pat will also be in studio with us on Sunday morning. You all should be as well. It's the a Rotoworld live show, NBC Sports YouTube page from noon to 1. Just trying to help you set your optimal lineups each and every week. Tons of start-sit questions, all the notable news, all the notable plays and fades and all that good stuff. Pat, thanks so much again. Check out his rankings. Check out Nick Mensio's start-sit column as well. So for John Daigle, for Josh Norris, we'll talk to you soon. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and tell one friend. Talk to you soon. See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.